from Stride and Abhitej from Persistence. And nice. I ask you to introduce yourself, maybe.
Yes, I'm Abhitej. I take care of ecosystem at Persistence. Super excited to be here. I can see the hype is real for liquid staking for sure. The interest is only building up more and more.
Hey, I'm Joe from Ingenuity, the team behind Quicksilver. Obviously, I've been in the space for 4.5 years or so, so I've been following liquid staking since the Chorus team first looked at it back in 2019, and excited to still be here, and it's great to see so many people interested.
Hey everyone, I'm Vishal, one of the co-founders of Stride. I first got into crypto in 2018. I was involved in like a DeFi stablecoin and kind of meandered my way through, but got pretty interested in Cosmos over the last couple of years. And we started building Stride earlier this year, and we're excited to tell you more about it today.
Okay, thank you. We can start with the first question. We already saw and listened the Atom 2.0 roadmap, and it includes the liquid staking solution for the growth, the economic growth of the Cosmos ecosystem. And so I would like to listen from you how your project, your protocol, will help the ecosystem to go on, improve, and expand.
And personally, at Persistence, we have always believed that liquid staking is that middleware between the growth of a proof of stake ecosystem and a DeFi ecosystem on top of it. And it's like, if there's a liquid staking first approach for any ecosystem, it allows to create a lot of utility around the native asset of that ecosystem, and that itself grows a lot of interest in the growth of the ecosystem, because the security being the primary objective for any proof of stake ecosystem requires that there is enough like economic value for people to hold that token, and that's what liquid staking enables. This vision was sort of like very early on realized at Persistence, and that's why we sort of started working on liquid staking for Cosmos back in 2020 and launched it in May 2021, like way before IBC was there, way before Osmosis took off, way before there was any DeFi. Although, you know, like a lot of people don't realize, doing something first also often means that you come across some challenges. So I think so for us, it's been a great learning experience. And now Atom 2.0 sort of like really embodies that vision of like how important liquid staking is. And we have put that into like all our learning experiences are sort of like now give a lot of validation from this paper. So what we are trying to do now is not just only focus on liquid staking as like a way to issue like a staked representative, but significantly work on how to create utility around those liquid staked assets, because that's the most crucial part. Like your staked representative token, if it doesn't have utility, there's not much of like value to that. And so that's what we are heavily focused, and that's why we say ourselves like liquid staking hub, where we want to create a whole ecosystem around staked assets and like eventually like create that user experience for people to like come in, and with the abstract away, which you know a lot of engineers talked about here, is like as like really like crypto companies or like builders, what we have to really do is abstract away that complexity for the end user. And once we are able to do that, is only then we will be able to achieve the primary goal of like providing that economic value to the end user.
Yeah, so obviously you know, everything that was covered before, but in addition to that, there is, as I said yesterday, liquid staking solves a couple of the biggest problems in the staking space. Firstly, the capital inefficiency of the fact that 95% of your staked assets are locked up and not usable. So we're able to unlock currently $5 billion of staked capital, but that's at somewhat conservative prices currently. So over the course of the next 5-10 years, we're talking tens, hundreds, potentially billions of dollars of capital that is currently locked up, but is then able to flow into DeFi ecosystems. And the Cosmos DeFi ecosystem is still very young, it's still very small, and we've got a great opportunity, all of us, to be part of making that ecosystem explode. The other thing on top of that is, obviously, liquid staking allows us to go from a situation where users have to make these choices currently, we go from not having to make that choice anymore, so users can, or more users than currently can stake, and therefore the bonded security behind a network increases over time.
Yeah, totally agree with everything that's been said. I think it's a really key way in which liquid staking can help unlock value for Atom 2.0. Two other things I want to kind of quickly mention. So first is interchain security. This is kind of a key part of Atom 2.0, but I think it goes beyond just one chain renting security from the hub, but I kind of imagine the future where you have tons of different app chains who have specialized purposes, and they all rent security to and from each other based on how much they operate together. So for example, you might imagine a liquid staking provider renting security from every chain they service, but also giving security back, for example, proportional to TVL on that chain. So if you have like 10 million of Osmo and then like 50 million on the hub, you might rent 1:5 ratio. And that way, when you onboard new chains, you don't really have this issue of like your TVL might grow faster than your token price. But I think liquid staking might be like one of the first ways that people can battle test like mesh security, ICS v3. I mean, it's a really exciting kind of future there. Yeah, and then the second thing I would say is there's this topic on kind of like, you know, towards the tail end of Atom 2.0, but on MEV and how Atom and the whole like ecosystem. Right now, everything is obviously interchain, but we're still kind of like in the early stages of interchain, I would say. Like IBC middleware is so early, ICA, ICQ, these things are all like super experimental. I think what we're going to start seeing is much more true interchain activity, especially as you have more true app chains. And it's a question of like, how do you capture that value, particularly as Atom? And liquid staking is, I think, one of the first ways that we could start doing that. So you might imagine liquid staking providers start incentivizing validators to run like something akin to some sort of like a Skip, Flashbots, et cetera, protocol there, and then they do the interchain MEV themselves through liquid staking because you're operating on tons of different chains, and then you can flow that back to the hub, maybe through ICS, maybe you rent security from the hub, and then you stream the revenue that you get from all the MEV on those. So anyways, I think liquid staking is just one of the core primitives, and can start really kind of pursuing this true app chain vision the hub is moving towards.
Thank you. And now I will start with you, Vishal. So you are not always the last one. And I would like to ask you how, if you have some project to onboard community, how you are planning to move people to use your protocol.
Oh man, great question. So first and foremost, just have a really good product. And I think people in the community, especially Cosmos, are incredibly knowledgeable and technical, and I think really understand the future vision. And so I think just building really good products, people get appreciation for it, and that starts driving people towards like liquid staking protocols, and all of which have different strengths. The second way, though, I think is at least for Stride, is we're really focusing on integrating with other protocols. Like we're a true app chain, so we don't do anything beyond liquid staking. So you come to us to liquid stake, but as a result, we need to drive value for the SD tokens. And a big way that we do that is we integrate with other protocols. So we've started integrating like Silk, Membrane, Agoric, Kujira, a bunch of other protocols. And the idea is that we can start showing other like ecosystems how much value liquid staking unlocks for them, even if they don't have staking at all, just as collateral, for example, or there's so many other ways you can start unlocking value. And then as we start kind of integrating to those communities, you get this sort of natural word of mouth. But we're still in the very early days, so we're still iterating on how we can expand reach.
Yeah, as Vish said, integrations are going to be key to the success of any liquid staking protocol. So not just integrating with other chains, but applications on other chains. For example, the ecosystems around CosmWasm and around EVMs, working out how to integrate directly with those the applications on those chains is going to be key as well. And I guess the key thing from our side is going back to our key vision of facilitating empowering users and giving them options when it comes to things like governance and choice over validators, things like that. So making the staking, the liquid staking process and workflow as close to the native process as possible. So it's essentially, as Vishal said, around user experience, making that whole thing as simple as possible. Folks are used to Cosmos staking, they know what it looks like, so try and keep things as close as that as possible, and hopefully that will drive adoption.
Yeah, all good points covered by both gentlemen. And I think I would like to simplify it in just two terms. One is security, the primary objective that we want to like focus on at bstake, and the other second one is just user like utility for the assets. That's user experience. So that's sort of like, you know, there's a fat protocol thesis, right? You talk about is that a user should not be, the flow should not be so complicated that they have to hop from chain to like really use their staked assets, which creates, as Vishal talked about, still interchain whole experience is in its primitive stages. And then it's like still very complicated for people to understand, oh, I need to attach my Kepler to another chain, or that should be added as a chain on my Kepler wallet, and then I provide liquidity. So what we are trying to do at Persistence is that something that we want to capture as a whole, that the application itself captures all the utilities that are around that asset. So the user does not need to move out of the application to really use their staked asset. If this user experience is provided, more and more people will see that value, because it's not just asset issuance, but it's asset deployment and then reusing those assets back into the ecosystem. And sort of like, say, creating on-ramps and on-ramps for people to directly jump into staked assets. That's like the key crucial part that we are also trying to focus at Persistence. And so whole focus is that you are able to give an end user an experience that they never have to really worry about what's going in the background. A simple example of that is you never worry about like how Uber is booking a cab for you, who are all cab drivers that you reach out to. You just book a cab. It's a click of a button, and you know, you get a driver, you get your metrics of how much distance, how much time would it take, and a payment. That's sort of what we are trying to do at Persistence, is like give the risk parameters as well for the users. Okay, if you're using it on this application, what could be the risk parameter? And this is how much cost it would be, or this is the APY you would get across all like different applications. So they really have the vision of like what they want to do with their staked assets.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is even one of the power of the Cosmos ecosystem. For example, that you can move token natively, you know, all around the ecosystem with IBC without know how IBC is working behind. So it's different than using, for example, a bridge. So people are always scared, oh, where are my token? I will lose it. So I think that the user experience will be one of the main drivers for the adoption of liquid staking. And concerning this, I would like to ask you, which do you think will be the most important application of liquid staking? How people would like and will use liquid staking all around the Cosmos?
I mean, I already have like 10 different utilities for staked assets. Like one, but I would say most important, what we have to realize is what are staked assets, right? They're yield-bearing assets. So if they're yield-bearing assets, there are a lot of things that can be created very easily for them. So something like self-repaying loans can be created. More stabilized indexes can be created. You can create options and perpetuals for these staked assets, which are more secure than, you know, just like a native asset. The other thing is you really want to also create an applications of like arbitrage, where like more and more users are like ensuring that the staked assets are not getting like exchange rate is not significantly lower or higher. So I think so like a lot of DeFi primitives that have been around but have not gotten the adoption they needed are going to come true with staked assets, because if you see, staking has been the only one sustainable use case of DeFi. So far, the only way to earn like sustainable income that is based on the inflation of the network. And now the staked assets embody that, and now using that into DeFi makes DeFi more sustainable. You're not promising like a promised 20% out of thin air. So you're not creating tokens out of thin air just to incentivize people. Now you are doing it through the protocol inflation. So that's what I think are these some of the use cases, but more new use cases and implementations will come across.
Yeah, unfortunately, you've covered the DeFi primitives piece, but actually, I think the one thing that I'm really excited to see is the interprotocol that Zaki and Dean were discussing earlier. Obviously, they mentioned it back at Cosmos last year, I think, or was it? No, it was in Prague. So yeah, so obviously that's been a while coming, and obviously using liquid staked assets to underpin that is going to be a fantastic use case for liquid staking.
Yeah, totally agree with all those. I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit and give a very niche use case, but I think this is probably, guessing, I think it's going to be one of the biggest use cases for liquid staking. I think it's collateral. So in particular for like loans or stablecoins, right now it's impossible to do this in Cosmos. Like it'd be kind of silly to deposit like Evmos as collateral in a stablecoin, and you're getting inflated away at like 400% a year. And it kind of is true for a whole host of applications. I think it's probably the first place you see immediate lift because it doesn't require a bunch of complicated integrations. You can do it day one as long as the application supports you as collateral. Yeah.
Yeah, and now I would like to ask you if you have in mind how to use liquid staking to improve decentralization on the networks, because we know how people do when they land in a new protocol. They just saw the first protocol, the first validator, and then delegate, maybe because they are scared that they cannot receive the airdrop if the validators go out of the set. And so I would like to ask you what you think about that, and maybe even how liquid staking can improve governance participation. No, this time.
Yeah, great question. And to totally agree on the problem. Like we've seen this all over, where people have limited attention, that they focus on projects. Like people might be invested in 30 or 40 different projects. It's hard to really investigate validator sets of each of those. And you see this, like I do the same thing. You tend to gravitate towards the validators you see or active on Twitter or high up in the set, and you know we're going to be there. You see this not just in like staking. You see this for like stocks or anything. Like I'm sure a bunch of us invest in like S&P 500 stocks, but I've never invested in like an S&P 1000 stock. Like it's so irrelevant. And so you have this kind of like this issue where you have a bunch of people who want to be invested, and it's hard for them to really like do in a way that it can be decentralized effectively, and it opens up a good opportunity for liquid stakers to say, how can we help promote this? And I think there's a couple of things that almost all liquid staking providers can do that my guess is going to kind of become the norm. The first is maybe providers can enforce restrictions on like what the centralization of stake entails. So maybe like no more than X% of the protocol can be staked with a validator. Maybe you can't stake with a validator who has over N%. Yeah, you might do something where the protocol's guidance is to increase the Nakamoto coefficient of any like chain. There's all sorts of kind of like guidance that governance can give on different protocols. And there's tons of different merges here, but we're still so early that we're still in the experimentation phase. So we'll see. Like I'm sure everyone's going to learn from each other on what the right validator selection mechanism is. The one thing the philosophy Stride has for right now at least is that there are a lot of people in the community who are really dedicated and knowledgeable and do a lot of learning on liquid staking, on staking in general, and have really good insights as to like what entails a good validator. And we're hoping to get guidance from those individuals and have them guide governance to decide weights. So right now we're working with informal systems to have, they're working on a set of rankings to say which validators are helping the chains the most, and we want to have them guide governance to pick these weights. But again, it's very early, so we'll see what's ultimately going to be the most effective. I think liquid stake in general is such a new, I know it's so big, but it's only been around for like 18 months. So I think we're still early on to see how the end weights will go. But we do have a huge opportunity here to really decentralize wallet networks.
Yeah, absolutely agree with everything you said. I think from Quicksilver's point of view, it's a kind of a deviation from how you put it, but what we're intending to do is take some part of the inflation rewards from inflation. Thanks, Joe. And essentially, we take lots of all the information on chain around performance of validators, like what the return rate is versus commission rate, what the uptime score of a validator is, what the decentralization Nakamoto coefficient is for across the chain. And also governance participation as well. So how many proposals has this validator voted in over this last period of time? We take all those factors together, we aggregate them into a score, and depending on which validators you have chosen to delegate your stake to, or it was a signal your intent to, then that determines how much of that slice of inflation rewards you get. So we're kind of incentivizing these choices that stakers have to make, and it's not so much about giving tokens to people that we think are making the right choice. Obviously, this metric is algorithm based, and it can change over time because other factors will come into play, or will determine that some factors are more important than others. But it's more about getting delegators to think about the validators that they're talking to, think about the validators they're delegating to. So, as you said, like, a lot of folks come into the ecosystem and go, okay, top 10 validators, that's my choice, that's easy. But obviously, that's not always the best thing for the network. So we want to incentivize users to consider that maybe smaller validators, maybe validators that are really active on the governance scene, maybe over time we'll take things from off-chain sources, as long as they're obviously verifiable and consistent and reliable, and factor those in as well. But essentially, we want delegators to focus on the validators that are doing a good job and not the ones that just show up and have a node online.
I think so. Like all the liquid staking protocols are thinking on very similar lines of creating this scoring mechanism for the underlying validators to think about, like, okay, how you are really putting out the validator. It's not like, I don't think so it's an evil to be the top validator on chains. So if these validators have really put in efforts to really focus on the governance and then participate, they do have to be incentivized to keep doing that. Because if the bigger validators move away from the change because they don't see an incentive, then that's also wrong. So it just says like creating a balance between how do you balance smaller validators among the bigger validators, or sort of like something that we have been ideating at Persistence is like creating a rotational validator set where you can rotate validators across like chain. And so it's like as you select like a set of tier 1 validators, tier 2 validators, and tier 3 validators. That's based on like how much stake they own. And then sort of like rotate them on the basis of like keep rotating them, and so that smaller validators keep getting, so there's like they're dynamic set. So there's a bigger set, like bigger validator, medium tier validator, smaller validator, and then the stake goes to them. And then so sort of you have created as buckets of like people who are all getting stake and equal stake over time, which sort of like ensures that there is stake decentralization, but it also ensures that incentive alignment for all validators on the chain. And this is very important because what we've been doing is work like this. I think so comes with the experience of like building a liquid staking solution for a longer time. What you've realized is like you cannot negate the bigger validators who are on chain because they're providing so much value, whether it's with infrastructure, whether it's with governance, whether it's the experience that they bring in, not just from one chain, but across different chains. And so that's where like something like mesh security would become even more significant, because you want these validators to like being operating on multiple chains. You want them to have more stake in the game. You want them to be more invested in the welfare of that ecosystem. So yeah, these are things. And I think so one interesting thing that I've sort of been discussing with a lot of folks here is like, how do you ensure incentive alignment for the delegators to stake to certain validators? So you can actually like, which you said, governance is not just like delegating to the validators, but also participating in the network governance. So how do you ensure the incentive alignment for holding your staked asset along with your participation? So if somebody is holding STK Atom and, for example, they go and participate in the governance and underlying chain, how do you incentivize that across, like, for example, with your protocol token, or like more incentives or exclusive APYs? And that will really like encourage people to like really vote, which is hard to do at the, say, native chain level for if it's just an atom today. So whether do you create like an incentivation DAO to incentivize people who have been most active holders of that staked assets. So these are like very interesting use cases still being ideated, but like I think so we will come across like a standard, which I do see, and this is something that is hard for people to understand who are outside of Cosmos, that, oh, it's not so much of competition, it's like every protocol is learning so much with each other. So it's kind of, I think so, hopefully, you know, Stride, Quicksilver, Lido, P-Stake, all are able to come together and form these governance standards. Another big thing, airdrop standard, which I feel is gonna be the biggest challenge for the liquid staking protocols.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree, and I would like to remain on the governance side, because if someone wants to onboard on your protocol and start liquid staking with you, could be the problem that since you are everybody are almost starting the mainnet in the same time, that all the people start unbonding contemporarily. Okay. And how do you think the governance will be redistribute the power during this period of unbonding, or how you solve this problem?
I think it's a very good question, specifically like when protocols are launching together. There are two things to it. One, particularly at Persistence, we are not encouraging people to unstake or undelegate their tokens from the underlying chain, which is Cosmos Hub, but we're waiting for the liquid staking module by inclusion to come around. And to do so, what we have done at Persistence is created a very modular approach that each chain sort of has its own module, specific module. So STK Atom module on Persistence chain is very different from STK Osmo chain. Now, when liquid staking is enabled on, say, Cosmos Hub, we are immediately, we have that capability to replace the liquid staking module that is for STK Atom with the liquid staking module by inclusion and add the capabilities. That would allow us to like very fast move and acquire those users who would then want to migrate. During that time, still, if you look at, there are 40% of liquid atom out there in market, which is an Osmosis or JUNO swap, or there's so much. That market itself is enough to capture for like next 2 to 3 months. And to do so, what we plan to do is, like things that we are doing now is creating that, as I said, that user experience and incentivizing people to be more active in governance. And so, yeah, I mean, it might not be the best approach, but something that we know is important for the security of the underlying network that we are supporting, because we can't be greedy. You have to realize, like, if you are not an active, good player or like a supportive player of the ecosystem, at a certain time you will collapse. And that sort of is like what our vision is, not to like go out and that's why it's not, being first is not the biggest advantage. Being the most active player in this space is most important, and this goes for all liquid staking players. It's not a DeFi application which you would extract like, TVL from other DeFi applications to make your application fat. That doesn't work. I think it's at a certain end. Something that I would really like to add, this vision that we have had first, we're not gonna we have set the maximum parameters as well for p-stake. So is that beyond that point, we will stop the deposits into p-stake. So we're never the bottleneck of failure of the underlying network, and this goes for all networks, right? So these are, I think, so different ways, different protocols of thinking.
Yeah, you make some really good points there, especially around sort of caps to ensure that no liquid staking solution has more than a figure from the area is about 30% of stake, but potentially lower than that. I think exactly as you rightly said, there's enough liquidity in all of these networks currently. I think on average it's about 40%, to not expect a mass unbonding as soon as chains go live. And I think that's clearly played out as other solutions have come online. So, I mean, I think that liquid staking in Cosmos is kind of in this beta phase right now until the LSM comes online. So I think that's going to be the critical point, the turning point when Cosmos enables LSM, which, as I say, is probably 2 or 3 months away, and when other chains, which potentially might come sooner, enable LSM, that's going to be the turning point that allows these staked assets to be onboarded to networks without having to unbond, so no one loses any rewards and the networks don't lose security. So I think that's going to be the critical point.
Yeah, I'll totally agree with everything that's been said. I have maybe a slightly contrarian answer on top of this, though, which is that don't expect there's going to be that much demand for liquid staking in the early days when someone launches a project. So for context, the hub has around $3 billion of assets staked. Any one project got like $100 million within 3 weeks. That would be like unprecedented throughout crypto. In like a bull market, that's an exceptionally high amount of product market fit initially. In a bear market, it's like kind of crazy. But even beyond that, like liquid staking is a really valuable service. It is not that valuable day one. Like until you can plug in your derivative asset, like your LSD, into like an AMM or a stable coin, and other people start actually using it and accepting it as currency, like there's not really a huge reason to unbond and start using it. And so I have seen this concern echoed, but I don't know, it doesn't resonate that much with me. Like $3 billion, imagine 30% of that $1 billion unstaked, even across 4 protocols, would be like, each of these protocols has gotten some of the most massive adoption of any project in crypto for the first few weeks. The other thing is, I think the projects are actually somewhat staggered on launch time. There's 4 projects, and as long as they're staggered by 2 weeks for example, most unbonding time is not staggered on any one project. I think what's probably likely to happen is people start gradually integrating their derivative assets into more and more protocols. Utility starts going up and up, and more people start realizing, oh, it actually does make sense for me now to switch my asset over. And so I think it's unlikely we're going to see this kind of mass unbonding happen.
And okay, we arrived at the last question, and even if the liquid staking module is just at his early days, have you in your roadmap some improvements, something to introduce, or how you will customize to your need this implementation? Sorry.
Yeah, a great question. This is on the liquid staking module, like how could we customize that to our needs? Yeah. Good question. So it depends a little bit on how each chain is going to actually end up integrating LSM. There's a handful of parameters that chains have to decide when they onboard LSM. So for example, the getting too nitty-gritty, LSM lets you basically tokenize your delegation to any one validator. So let's say I delegate to Strangelove, I can tokenize that individual stake and then go transfer that to someone else. But there's a restriction how much I can tokenize, and it depends on how much Strangelove has delegated to themselves. But the ratio is a parameter to determine a chain. So I think there's lots of room for people to investigate, like what are the optimal parameters. Too low is bad because then you're not really tokenizing anything. Too high is bad because you might get bad validator incentives. So I think there's a lot of research people can do in that direction. There's also LSM. I think right now is mostly a developer tool, in that it's extremely hard for a user to feasibly tokenize their shares and do something meaningful with them. Like unless you make some AMM for all 150 validators in the hub, it's a little bit tough. So I think there's a lot of work in, so all liquid staking providers you can imagine is one layer wrapped around LSM. So there's, like let's say Stride supports 150 validators, you go stake with us, we give you back a derivative asset that represents a claim on all 150 validators, kind of just a wrapper around 150 LSM like tokens. But it doesn't have to be like 150, maybe you'll have like the ability to mint arbitrary subsets of the validator set. So you can imagine kind of arbitrary wrappers around the LSM derivatives. So someone comes in, they're like, I really just want to support bare metal validators. Maybe they go through one of the LSD providers who exposes it as a service. They can now go mint a separate LSD that's just bare metal. And then they do that by wrapping around LSM. So I think LSM is incredibly cool, interesting core infra. And now it's time, like there's a whole room of space for amazing product people to come in and think about how can we best make this consumer facing.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting you raised that point of kind of groups of subsets of validators, because that's something that back when I was at Chorus we actually looked at in an internal hackathon once. So actually the idea is, yeah, it's really cool. And I think it alludes to the power of what LSM can provide. Like it's beyond just us and our current plans. It's certainly like there are use cases that we probably can't even imagine right now, as is with everything with DeFi. So yeah, it's really cool that LSM's on its way. It's going to be massive, and it's going to kind of unlock this entire industry for sure.
Yeah, I mean, great points covered by Vishal there. And specifically, you have to understand what is going to be LSM. It's sort of like every person who moves their stake is sort of going to be an NFT. Now, and this NFT is going to capture like the time they're staking, the validator they're staking with, what is the commission rate. It's sort of like all the metadata going to be recorded. And now sort of like if you have to see this, since there's NFT, sort of there has to got to be a wrapper layer on top of it. So for each protocol, that would become an important part. So what we're going to add on top of it is this wrapper layer, which abstract away that complexity of people to like really rotate these NFTs around. And the other thing which we're going to think, as I said, like we are already approaching like a modular approach. So we don't have a generic liquid staking module, sort of like which implements across all chains. We are creating these very niche chain focused modules which sit within the persistence chain, core one chain. And so what we will be also doing is modifying the liquid staking module for each chain. Now, why it's important to understand is that even the Cosmos SDK base infrastructure is same or tech stack is same, but different chains are operating on different WASM module, with different IBC module, different SDK version, and that sort of creates like a complication, because if you have creating a generic solution or adopting liquid staking a module as a general solution into your protocol, sort of like what you can support is the bare minimum, whichever is the last sort of like chain version is, and beyond that you just can't make, which creates the difference between, say, how the native asset operates against the staked representative asset. And so for us, it's very important when we are implementing liquid staking module is that the base asset and the staked asset are sort of like very like synchronous in the nature of how they're adopted into protocols or how they're operated on chain. So those are like few things that we would try to tinker around with LSM.
Thank you. Very, very interesting your future works and your idea. And it's all. Thank you guys. And I remember to everybody that this is an open mic. So if someone of you want to come here and talk, is free. Thank you.